information.
Yeah, not good news, but
I get that. I did send you a note. And I'll just talk to you afterwards.
Sure.
Yeah.
yeah, you're welcome. I was hoping everyone's know.
Okay, we're live. Welcome to the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules meeting, February 1st, 2024. We'll need every minute of this hour to get through what we need to discuss today, both the PCP rule and the wake boat rule. And before we get started, I'd like to go around and do introductions.
Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel.
Representative Mark Higley, and I represent the Orleans-Lamoille District.
Jenny Lyons, Senator representing Chittenden Southeast.
Good morning, Senator Dave Weeks, representing Rutland County, and I come from Brock.
Representative Carol Odie, representing the far new north end of Burlington.
Senator Chris Bray, representing the Addison Senate District.
Seth Longgrass, Arlington, Manchester, Sandgate, and part of Sunderland.
Senator Mark McDonald, Orange County. And Trevor Swirl, representing Underhill and Jericho. First item on the agenda are the minutes from January 18th, 2024.
Make a motion,
Oh, go ahead.
approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, first rule of today is Rule 23P42, Department of Environmental Conservation, Investigation, and Remediation of Contaminated Properties Rule, known as the I rule. And I'm not sure, we have a number of witnesses listed here, but I doubt that all of them are speaking.
No.
Who's going to take the lead on this?
Hi, good morning. Linda Preventure from the Waste Management Division. And with me today, I have environmental analyst. With me is Matt Chapman, the Director of the Waste Management and Prevention Division. And we also have Sean Donovan, environmental analyst, who's also been working on the IWA. So I know we're very pressed for time today, so I'll just dive in.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Sure. I'm here to talk about we also have Trish Coppolino. She is the Senior Program Manager of the Sites Management Section in the Waste Management and Prevention Division. I'm here to talk about the proposed changes, proposed updates to the Investigation and Remediation of Contaminated Properties Rule, otherwise known as the I Rule. What the I Rule does it establishes procedures and requirements for conducting assessment and cleanup at properties where a release of a hazardous material has occurred. It includes procedures for identifying contamination to environmental media, as well as requirements for cleanup, monitoring, distribution controls, and site closure. It also includes numerical standards for soil vapor, indoor air, and sediments. Some of the proposed changes. The most notable changes which initiated updating this rule is related to PCBs. In 2021, the Vermont legislature passed Act 74, which required all schools built or renovated before 1980 to test indoor air for PCBs. Subsequently, the Vermont Department of Health derived interim indoor air standards, which are the school action levels. These values will be adopted in the final rule. Some other standards also have been updated, including values for lead, MTBE, and PFAS compounds. Most of the other changes are largely housekeeping changes in the rule, such as updating definitions to be more consistent with other rules that have been recently updated, such as like for above ground storage tanks and source protection areas. We also updated the notification requirements. So notification to our division is required when conducting any earth disturbance work in active or closed sites prior to conducting the work. We clarified which environmental media standards are applicable for different scenarios. And we included additional language specific to allowing for interim or partial corrective action plans. We had quite a bit of public outreach during this rulemaking process. In March 2022, we notified the regulated community that we were beginning the process of updating the rule, solicited input on areas of the revisions were thought necessary. Then in March 2023, the draft rule was sent to the regulated community, developers, and affected state agencies, and input was solicited on the proposed changes. An in-person pre-rulemaking meeting was held in Waterbury to present the rule and answer questions. The rule was then put out for public comment from October 25th, 2023 through December 4th, 2023. A public meeting was held in Waterbury State Office Complex on November 27th, 2023. And of note, there were no comments received concerning the PCB indoor air standards, only regarding clarifying when each standard is applicable, and we included additional clarity based on those comments. That pretty much summarizes our proposed updates. If there's any questions that are not related to PCBs, I'm happy to address those. Any questions related to the PCBs, I'm going to turn that over to Matt Chapman.
Sure. And just to sort of frame before we open it up for questions. So I'm primarily here to discuss both PCB questions generally and specifically the issues raised by the House Committee on Education related to the economic impact statement. So as I think the committee is aware, we provided a general economic impact statement with the rule. Through the process, the House Committee had requested additional detail from the agency on what projected costs might be with respect to the rule. We went back and looked at our experience with the rule, with the PCB program to this point. So what are the approved cost estimates that we have? What's sort of our experience in managing contaminated sites like this? And basically modeled or estimated what the cost would be through the completion of the program with the schools remaining out there. I think, I've talked to some members of the committee. It's obviously an imperfect modeling process. It's based on the best information the agency has, but there's certainly uncertainty associated with it. I think it is both a good faith estimate, and I think it's a reasonable estimate of what the costs are likely to be with respect to the completion of the program. I think the other thing that's probably warranted for the committee to appreciate is that we're currently administering the program under a statutory provision that allows us to take a Department of Health advisory and make it a standard for a period of 2 years. So we basically have been operating under that health advisory since February 2nd, 2022. The 2-year period ends Friday of this week. So after that standard lapses, there's a general provision within the I rule that says that EPA, what are called regional screening levels, apply when there is no standard in place. The regional screening level for PCBs in indoor air is 5 nanograms per meter cubed. And just to give you a reference point, the health department's standards are 30, 60, and 100, depending on the age level of the children in the classroom. So it would result in a significant decrease to the standard if this rule does not get adopted, and would create operational issues with the program beyond those that people are concerned about today. So that's my summary of the sort of economic impact statement and where we are with respect to PCBs. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee has.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Just for the committee, I also had a conversation yesterday afternoon with the chair of House Education regarding his letter, the committee's letter to this committee with concerns, which the agency has now responded to those concerns. And I asked if the chair of his committee, where they stood at this point in time. And they've essentially withdrawn their objection. I think they're not happy with not understanding what the numbers are. We all appreciate that it is a little bit of a moving target. And I would probably suggest that maybe for next week, since we don't have a lot of time today, think about whether we want to send letters to committees of jurisdiction around some of this and take this up So just a thought. Any other questions from the committee? Senator Bray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chapman, good morning.
Good morning.
So just to make sure I have it correct in my notes here, if we don't approve the levels that you're citing, proposing in the rule, then the current standards in Vermont, the 3060, 100, we lose those and we default to the EPA limits, which are, depending on which one you're looking at, like 6 times. No.
No,
I
so,
want to
so,
make sure I know which way it's.
right, so the rule uses a specific EPA table, which are it's called the EPA Regional Screening Level Table, and the standard in the EPA RSL tables for PCBs and indoor air is significantly lower than what our current standards are. So it will be 5 nanograms per meter cubed as opposed to 160 and 30.
Right, sorry, I think I said it sounded upside down the way I said it. It
Yes, it
becomes more stringent,
becomes more stringent.
6-fold, 12-fold, whatever.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Senator Weeks?
Thank you. Good morning, Mr.
Good morning.
Chairman. Good to see you
Good to
again.
see you too, sir.
So I understand that, I've read the economic impact. I've read Representative Collins' letter. Unfortunately, in the email that went out, your response, the link didn't work. So I was wondering if you can articulate what is the anticipated economic impact in some notional numbers that we can relate to originally.
Sure. So the table itself, the memorandum that I sent around, did you not get a copy of the memorandum? There was a table included in that memorandum. Thank you. And basically the costs for the program after sort of the FY25. So there's a House educate. I think provided to both Senate Education and House Education, I believe also to the Appropriations Committee, a summary of how we're going to retool the program to prioritize children's health issues first, right? And frankly, let some issues that don't present an immediate health risk to be deprioritized until school construction related issues take place, provided that they don't create an issue and we can manage through them. So that gets us to FY25. The table that I provided in the supplemental economic impact statement basically is the estimate beyond FY25. So the best case estimate is that it will be somewhere between 29 million and 67 million to run the program through its completion after the FY25 process is completed.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Bray?
Mr. Chair, so I often bring as a chair of a committee of jurisdiction, I often bring the form to the meeting in case I have a final question. So I just wanted to report. So for Senate Natural Resources and Energy signing off on the rule, and I'd like to move approval of Rule 23P42.
A motion to approve Rule 23P42. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First one.
So we have Rule 23P17.
Mr. Chair, the question I will ask, and perhaps it's for discussion purposes later, is to how we can convey the information that was in Matt Chapman's letter to committees of jurisdiction so that there's an understanding about the default position should the rule not have been passed today.
Okay.
And the consequences of that for schools across the state.
Okay. We can ask Ledge Council to draft something for us.
That'd be great.
Okay, great. And we'll talk also about which committees that should go to.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. All right, so we have two items here related to this rule. One is a request for extension of the adoption deadline. Are you doing that or is?
Come on. I will be doing that. Yes.
Okay, and then we'll take up the rule itself. I asked the committee if I'd like to make a change to the order of folks providing testimony. We're going to hear from the department on the rule, okay? And then I would like to hear from the petitioners that graded the work that ANR did on this rule next, which I believe is John Witness and Meg Handler, and then the rest of them would follow after that. So I'm just moving the agenda around a little bit. Is there any objection from the committee members? Seeing none, then that's what we'll do, okay? So we'll start with the extension request. Who's doing that?
Thank you. And if I may, Chair, we'll introduce ourselves from the
Yeah.
department first. So
Yeah.
go ahead, Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura DeLugalecki with the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Watershed Management Division.
And Caitlin Ellerman, I'm an attorney with the Agency of Natural Resources.
I'm Jason Batchelder, DEC Commissioner.
And the first item is an extension request for the rule adoption deadline. You should have received in your Monday materials a letter from the Secretary identifying or calling attention to the current adoption deadline based on previous 843C is February 21st. And this committee has until February 17th to complete its review. That doesn't give the agency much time to react and file. So we wanted to call attention to that and ask that we have a reasonable amount of time following the conclusion of your review to get that filed before our time expires. A proposal was assuming everything is completed by February 17th would be approximately 1 month out. That put us at around March 28th or late March for an adoption. The effective date can be 15 days, give or take after that. That's the minimum.
So March 28th is the date you're requesting?
I believe that's what I included in a letter.
Edge Council said yes.
Motion to.
Yes, I would.
I move that we accept the request.
Okay, we have a motion to accept that extension. Senator Bray?
Yeah, just a quick question. If the date were moved out that far would, and so enactment were postponed a little because of it, is that still in time so that you'd have rules in place for this voting season, whatever we'd call it?
Yeah, the effective date would certainly be for the season, the 2024 season.
Representative
And
Odie?
we'll speak to that in a little more detail during the rule discussion.
You're good? Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Please proceed with the rule.
Well, I'm going to provide a little bit of background about how we got where we are today. As you know, this petition, this rulemaking process was initiated in a somewhat different way. It was initiated from an external petition from citizens versus internal rulemaking. So in March of 2022, we received a petition from the Responsible Wakes for Vermont Lakes group requesting us to amend the use of public water rules to regulate the use of wake boats in Vermont lakes. The petition requested that wake sports could only occur in a wake sport zone, and those zones would be 60 contiguous acres of lake area that is offset from shore 1,000 feet on all sides and at least 20 feet deep. Based on the criteria they laid out in their petition, that would allow wake sports to occur on 15 of Vermont's inland lakes. And just some context, the use of public waters rules only applies to what we call inland lakes. So Lake Champlain, Lake Memphremagog, some of the reservoirs on the Connecticut River, they share a border with other states or with Canada. So the use of public water rules don't apply. We have about 73 inland lakes that allow motorboats to travel more than 5 miles per hour, where they're currently allowed to essentially create a wake. So this would allow wake sports on 15 of those based on their petition criteria. So after receiving the petition, we reviewed their proposal. We reviewed our regulatory authority under use of public water rules and how the agency is supposed to review petitions. And we embarked on a pretty rigorous pre-rulemaking request for public input. We held 2 public meetings and a written public comment period prior to initiating formal rulemaking. We received over 300 comments, and the vast majority, around 60 to 70% of folks, were in favor of the agency moving forward with some kind of rulemaking. We also did targeted small group public solicitations of public input. So we talked with affected user groups. So we talked to summer camp operators, loon biologists, water skier groups, lake associations. We also consulted with our sister departments, the Fish and Wildlife Department, Forest Parks and Rec. And we also consulted with the game wardens, the Fish and Wildlife game wardens, and the Vermont State Police, because those are the folks that are charged with enforcing the use of public water rules. So based on all of this public input, this targeted research, and also we did a pretty deep dive into the scientific literature. We developed a rule based on this input in our research that we were preparing to send to Lcar. Prior to submitting this proposed rule to Lcar, we held one more public meeting to share this information with the public. And basically, we shared that the agency agreed that the petitioners demonstrated accurately that there is a use of waters rule, there is a use of waters recreational conflict between wakeboarding and other recreational uses. And so under the use of public waters rules, section 2.6, it says that conflict shall be managed in a manner that provides for all normal uses to the greatest extent possible, consistent with section 2.2. And when regulation is determined to be necessary, which we agreed that it was, that use conflicts shall be managed using the least restrictive approach practicable that adequately addresses the conflicts. And so we determined that the proposed rule in the petition did not manage the conflict in the least restrictive manner possible to achieve the goal of conflict resolution. And so the agency put forth a rule that would have that wake boat could only operate in wake sport mode in wake sport zones that were 50 contiguous acres, which was less than what the petition proposed. They proposed 60. That the wake sport zone was offset 500 feet on all sides from the shoreline as opposed to 1,000, and that there was a minimum depth of 20 feet, which is in line with what the petitioners proposed. We also added a provision to decontamination to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species in between lakes for these wake boats. And the agency's proposed rule would allow wake sports on 31 inland lakes. So we submitted to Lcar, it was approved, and that opened up the public comment period for formal rulemaking. We held 2 public meetings. We received a lot of public input, a lot of public participation. After closure of the comment period, and we summarized the comments, re-examined literature, and I just kind of want to share some of the feedback we received. We had over 750 comments. Over 92% of the comments were in favor of some sort of regulation for wake sports. Only 7% of the comments were opposed to regulation. And if you take that 92% and break it down, 82% of the commenters were in favor of the rule that's more strict than what we proposed, and 10% were in favor of the rule as we proposed. And if you break down that 82% even further, half of the folks wanted a complete ban of wake sports on all inland lakes, and the other half were in favor of a 1,000-foot setback. So based on the substantial comments that the agency received, we took a closer look at the literature. And as we noted in the responsiveness summary, we were working with a really limited set of peer-reviewed scientific studies on this subject. And these studies all have wide ranges of the estimated impacts and wide ranges of impacts to shore with respect to wakeboating with a distance from shore. And they all had varying reference conditions And we take the comments very seriously, and we're working with the science and the authority that we had to come to a decision. And the agency determined that at this time, the evidence doesn't support an increase in the distance from shore to achieve the regulatory objectives for a statewide rule. So ultimately, the agency decided to maintain the distance as we proposed. But as of note, I would like to add that as a statewide rule, this, if adopted, this would be the most protective statewide wake sport regulation in the country to date. Additionally, based on the comments that we received, there were several revisions made to the rule as a result of those comments, including clarifications to the definitions, a clarification that a wake boat can operate in non-wake sport mode in other areas of the lake. We also updated the wake sport zone shape to eliminate any lobes or any areas that were less than 200 feet wide to be consistent with existing use of public water rules, which requires that distance. And so that actually eliminated another lake from our list. And so Lake Groton was kicked out, and now there are 30 lakes eligible based on our proposed rule. But the other conditions remain the same. And I can let Caitlin Ellerman walk through some of the language of the rule.
So I think that Laura has covered most of the topics. I will take a quick look and happy to take questions as we walk through the language of the rule itself. Again, in your Monday package, you will have seen a number of edits that we added, in particular based on the GIS review. It was called to our attention that Lake Groton fell off, and that did not make it into our initial Lcar filing. That change is now made with the current materials you have. That takes it down to 30 eligible lakes and removes or adds the wake sports prohibited under the Lake Groton water body specific requirements. And then there are a couple of other editorial adjustments, including calling attention to our aquatic nuisance control authority under the rule authority and a couple of other sort of technical corrections. I also wanted to call attention that we have also had some outreach related to the wake boat definition. So the wake sports prohibition you'll see is in section 3.8, the provisions related to wake sports and the requirements. The definitions are in section 5.17 and 18. And we did get some limited comments or some comments on the definition during public comment. We did clarify that definition, and it seems that we've gotten something that is agreeable to most folks. Just recently, it's been called to our attention that there's interest in having language added to the wake boat definition to identify other design features that might be included or used to increase the size of a motorboat's wake. And we're open to incorporating that if there is support. We don't see it as a dramatic deviation to what was contemplated. It wasn't specifically raised during public comment, so there is some concern about that process-wise. But we do note that it was included in the petition reference to design features, and we don't see this as a significant departure.
So Caitlin, will you be submitting new language for that then?
We can do that.
Yeah, why don't you do that? We're not taking a vote on this rule today, so we could have it before our next meeting. And any other changes might be contemplated.
I think, at this point, it's not a tremendous amount of language in the rule itself. You'll see in Appendix A, We've incorporated for those water bodies, numerous water bodies where wake sports are prohibited. Those are included on a water body basis. And then, of course, Appendix E includes the list of eligible wake sports zones.
In my reading of all the materials, and I didn't read all 1,200 pages of public comment, but about the issue of normal use. I was up in the application to there, but it's not in the rule. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
Sure. So normal use was referenced in the petition. We were not specifically asked to evaluate whether wake sports are a normal use. We were asked to put these sort of dimensional operational requirements on wake sports. And that was largely the focus from the beginning of the agencies engaging on this and the public input effort and drafting effort. It sort of came to light in the public comment review and response process. And I believe it was comment 26 that emphasized that we should determine wake sports not a normal use and therefore prohibit it. And we, in reviewing what our charge is under section 1424, the use of public waters rules authority, and the use of public water rules themselves, we point to or look to section 2.2 that describes or references boating as a use. We look to recognition of motorized vessels that can operate at 5 miles per hour or greater. And that's the context we were viewing these vessels through this process and identifying how to manage impacts to shoreline and impacts to sediment and interactions of uses. So our response kind of acknowledged that this is a type of motorized vessel, clearly go greater than 5 miles per hour. And that's how we're viewing it. We didn't make a specific statement whether or not this does constitute normal use because frankly, we did not do that historical analysis. We didn't ask for the public to weigh in on that. And we noted that regardless of that determination, if we were to make it, whether it's even if it is not a normal use, we're not directed or required to prohibit it. The focus is to ensure that any normal use is allowed to continue and is adequately protected. So on that point, there's nothing in the record that makes the determination because we didn't make it. There was initially a reference in our filing forms that the wakes produced by these boats are not a normal use. But that was frankly an oversight in our drafting process and has been removed.
Thank you. I'm conscious of time right now, and I do want to give the opportunity to folks that signed up to give testimony, provide testimony, but I also don't want to cut off discussion. So Representative Higley?
No, I agree with you. And I think at this point, there is another opportunity for us as a committee to ask questions and put our questions together. So we're running out of time and we have a lot of folks.
Okay. If it's okay with committee members, we'll move on.
So we'll be able to ask questions another time.
We're going to be coming back next week.
Yeah, so that's good.
With everybody. Yeah, okay.
So next up we have, do you have other comments or are you okay right now?
So that is all that we wanted to share. Commissioner
Okay.
Batchelder is here to speak to the extent there is interest in sort of the implementation aspect, in particular enforcement during this upcoming voting season based on consultation, recent consultation with game wardens.
We have Meg or John? It looks like Meg's.
Meg's going to go first.
Okay,
You want me to sit here?
yeah, that's fine. And please introduce yourselves. And we do want to keep the testimony brief, okay? Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. I'm Meg Handler, and I represent Responsible Lakes for Vermont Lakes, the petitioners. We've been working on this for 3 years. We are asking you to please approve the rule put forth by ANR with a few essential changes, which I'll describe in a moment. First, I feel compelled to let you know, even though we support the current rule, we are not happy or satisfied. Responsible Wakes stands by the original rule proposed in our petition. Over 1,000 people and numerous organizations publicly support our petition for a rule requiring wake boats to operate 1,000 feet from shore. Many supporters believe even this doesn't go far enough, that wake boats should be banned entirely from all inland lakes and ponds. There are people here and elsewhere who feel our organization is letting them down by supporting ANR's rule. Please know we are fully aligned with their concerns, even though we have decided to support the rule. Opposition from the wakeboat industry and wakeboat users has been weak. To our great surprise, opposition to robust and effective wakeboat regulation comes principally from within this administration, from ANR, the agency charged with protecting Vermont's natural resources. We feel our rule is justified, our public support is strong, and opposition outside ANR is minimal. Nevertheless, today our top priority is to have a rule put in place in time for this summer. Wake sports are growing fast, numbers are increasing, and boats are becoming ever more powerful and destructive. Vermont can't afford the risk that lakes might remain unprotected for another year or longer. For the good of all Vermont lakes, we ask you to please support this rule and to help ensure the rule goes into effect in time for the 2024 summer boating season. The home lake rule limiting wake boats to a home lake unless certified decontaminated will help prevent the spread of invasives. This is significant. While we commit to working toward a stronger rule, it's imperative to put this rule in place. That said, we have 2 important concerns. We understand that you've already discussed these with ANR, but I want to go through them for the record. First, we're concerned about ANR's application of the definition of normal use to wake sports. Back in June 2023, when ANR published its proposed wake sport rule, ANR stated that wake sports don't qualify as a normal use, as defined by the use of public waters rules. The term normal use has a clear and settled definition. Any lawful use of any specific body of public water that occurred on a regular, frequent, and consistent basis prior to January 1st, 1993. Wake sports were never regular, frequent, or consistent prior to 1993. Ample evidence demonstrates there is nothing normal about creating artificial ocean waves on tiny lakes in rural Vermont. With the release of its final rule, ANR reversed its view and classified wake sports as a normal use. ANR based this reversal on the unexplained declaration that wake boats are motorized vessels. This sets a dangerous precedent. ANR's reinterpretation threatens one of the core components of the use of public waters rules. Please object and ask ANR to remove references to wake sports as a normal use. from all documentation supporting this rule. Second, we're concerned about the definition of wake boat. I know you've already covered this with ANR, and we've provided you with a written explanation that carefully spells out a more comprehensive definition. Even with ANR's rule in place, Responsible Wakes remains committed to effectively regulating wake sports. We'll support individual lake petitions while advocating for a strong statewide rule. We'll also watch closely to ensure that ANR implements and enforces the rule this summer. Please expect that we'll be speaking with you this fall and advocating for a strong statewide rule or legislation so that fair regulation can be equally applied to all Vermont lakes. The bottom line is that despite our strong reservations, today we support ANR's rule. We're disappointed that ANR has given so much emphasis to protecting a small group of wake sport users instead of prioritizing environmental protection, public safety, and the equitable sharing of natural resources. As other states have shown, this sport is too destructive and growing too fast. Vermont can't afford to wait longer for a wake sport rule. This one is an important first step, and we intend to continue to work for a better rule. Please support ANR's rule, but please object and ask ANR to make 2 corrections: removing all instances where ANR deemed wake sports a normal use, and expanding the wake boat definition to secure inclusion of new technologies. Thank you for your time. We appreciate the attention you are all giving to this important issue.
Thank you. I gave her a little bit more time since they were original petitioners on this, but the rest of the testimony, I'd like to be 2 minutes or less for each individual. Are there any quick questions for John?
Thank you. Chair Squirrel and members of the committee. My name is Jack Widness. I live on Lake Rapond in Wilmington, Vermont. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today about representing our group's points. I'll try to keep this under 2 minutes as best I can. I think I can. Unmanaged use of wake boats is inconsistent with 2 Vermont statutes. One is the use of public water rules that we've heard about, and the other is the transport of aquatic invasive species. This was not covered in our original petition, but is covered now by the Lake Home Rule. Our group's 3 messages are: our consensus is that it's critical to have a use rule this summer, and we're grateful to the ANR and the DCC for this final rule. We're also grateful to Oliver, Laura, and their team who've taken us through the petition process, a difficult one over the last 3 years. And finally, ANR's final rule falls short of the rule needed for long-term management of wake boats, and I'm sure you'll be hearing more about this from others today. Why is having a rule in place critical for this summer? There's at least 3 reasons. First, all 73 of Vermont's lakes allowing motorized boats will have far greater AIS protection, and this is because of the home lake rule. Second, Vermont's 43 smallest lakes that currently allow motorized boats will, for the first time, be protected of all wake sport impacts. And finally, once a rule is in place, the 30 remaining Vermont lakes where wake boating is permitted can prepare their own local petitions for managing wake boats. Public support of individual lakes for a stronger rule may not have been adequately considered in the petition. An unprecedented number of public comments, 759 to be exact, were submitted. And of these, 82% requested a stronger rule than the ANR's 50-foot recommendation. Again, half were banning wake boats and half were for 1,000 feet or more. 17 associations shown here have taken lake associations have taken a position regarding having a rule. The 11 on the left were those that supported the 1,000-foot
There were 4 associations that supported a ban, and only 2 associations supported the 500-foot. In addition, there were 35 organizations that are shown below that have supported our minimum 100-foot distance. These include many conservation-minded groups.
John, I need you to finish up, okay?
And I thank you.
Right on. Got it.
To leave up the last slide just so we can look.
What's that, Carol?
Want me to leave the last slide up?
Okay. Any questions for John? Okay, next up I have Eric Splat with Wooded Marine. Let's try to turn this over as quickly as possible, okay? Okay, yeah, Eric Chittenden's on deck. Thank you. Senator.
Morning. Thank you for having me today. I'm Eric Splat from Bombazine, Vermont. First off, I just wanted to talk about the wake boat market. It is a small market. Boat sales have been about the same since the early 2000s. Wake boats in non-wake sport mode actually make a smaller wake than most boats on the water at normal operating speeds. I would like to voice my support of the proposed ANR rule of no more than 500 feet from shore regarding all wake boat activities, as this is middle ground for all parties involved. The proposed rule also become the most strict rule in the country regarding this specific water sport activity. It's currently proposed by the ANR. Lastly, I strongly believe cooperation and education should come first before severe restrictions on the water sports group are implemented. Vermont should focus on educating all vessel operators, power and non-power sport, on the current regulations through utilizing those that are certified to train and teach the Vermont Boating Safety Course, which I am. In true Vermont fashion, we accept and will abide by the proposed ANR rule as currently written at the 500 foot from shore requirement. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Eric. Eric Chittenden is up and Ray Gonda on deck.
My name is Eric Chittenden, and first I asked the Lcar send the current 500-foot proposal back to ANR and request it be amended to 1,000-foot rule. We're not seeking a ban on wake boats. ANR has calculated that Vermont has over 318,000 acres of surface water. They also calculate that 14,000 acres would be protected by a 1,000-foot rule, less than 5%. So with that rule, that leaves 304,000 acres open for wake boat use. In other words, even with a 1,000-foot rule, wake boaters would have 95% of the Vermont waters open to use. And these are not my numbers, by the way. They come straight from ANR. The proposed 500-foot rule is being laid over the 200-foot no wake zone, which means that the wake has only 300 feet to dissipate. I don't understand how they can possibly put it on top of this sacred 200 feet zone that is on every lake and pond in Vermont. At that point, there'd be about 2-foot waves in the 200-foot no wake zone. No data supports that these wakes dissipate in 300 feet. The science requires a minimum of 500 to 1,000 feet. Whatever distance is decided on, it should be measured from the lake edge of the 200-foot rule, not from shore. Otherwise, it becomes a wake dissipation zone, not just a no wake zone. And those would start at about 2 feet in height at the edge, which is unheard of in the 200-foot zone. We should start with the 1,000-foot rule. If wake boat surfers desire a 500-foot rule, they have the right to petition for it. Why should those who enjoy long-established rules from lakeside camps, homes, swimming, paddling, paddleboarding, fishing, and more, why should they be forced to present a petition? The system is backwards. If the wakeboarders should be able to start with 2,000, and then they could petition for 500. And if the people who live on that lake approve of it, it should go in that direction.
Eric, I need you to finish.
Okay, just one more sentence here. Wake surfing is like yahoos creating wheelies and burning rubber on the road in front of your house. We would not tolerate this. So why should such disturbing activity be tolerated on water in front of your lakefront? Shorelines are the most sensitive areas of all lakes and ponds. Let's get it right the first time and not be forced into multiple petitions that could go on for years. Now, thank you for your.
Thank you, Eric. Ray Gonda. And next up is Bruce Remick.
My name is Ray Gonda. I'm from South Burlington. Business engineer by trade and canoeist by passion and environmentalist. I'm passing around here a chart. This chart is an industry chart that ran out of the study. And what I'm going to do is help you understand this. There's a number of curves here of wake boat use at various depths of water. And the one that's most relevant to actual wake boat use in Vermont because of the proposed 20-foot deeper water for operation is the very top one. That's the only one that's relevant on this entire graph. That is called the deep water curve. And on the vertical axis, that is how tall the initial wave is created by the wake boat. And as you move out from left to right along the bottom axis, that's how far away from the boat the wave gets to. So you'll see some big arrows there that somebody else put on this chart. I didn't do that. One is at 1,000 feet. The way to read that is that yellow line crosses the 1,000 foot away from the boat mark with a wave height of about 5 inches. So that's how the whole chart reads. So if you start in the upper left corner, start out with a roughly 26, 27 inch wave height created by the wake boat. When you get over to the red line, the vertical red line, that's the 300 feet away from the boat. The wake height is about 13 or 14 inches.
Ray, I need you to close up.
Okay. So what this shows you is the 300 foot would be the edge of the 200 foot zone with the 500 foot rule, which says that it really makes moot the 200 foot zone. That there's really no purpose for it anymore because it doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Bruce Remick and Sheila Goss up on deck.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Bruce Remick. I'm a native Vermonter who grew up enjoying the Vermont outdoors and a full-time resident of Morgan, Vermont. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Seymour Lake Association, where I serve on the board of directors and as a selectman serving on the Morgan Select Board. Both the Seymour Lake Association and the Morgan Select Board support the proposed rule with a 500-foot shoreline offset, which we recognize would be the strictest statewide rule in the nation. With a 500-foot shoreline offset, we understand that only 30 of Vermont's 800 lakes would remain eligible to host wake boats. And at 1,000-foot shoreline offset, only 15 lakes would remain eligible. Of those 15 lakes, 10 are in the Northeast Kingdom, 8 are currently free of Eurasian milfoil. We believe that limiting wake boats to only 15 lakes poses an undue burden to the Northeast Kingdom and greatly increases the risk of spread of aquatic invasives that we've worked so diligently to keep at bay. I'd like to use my time today to briefly highlight what proactive lake associations like the Seymour Lake Association can do to work within the proposed rule to improve its implementation. With the proposed rule in effect, Seymour Lake Association plans mass communication using email blasts to all lake users to inform on the rules requirements, individual outreach to wake boat owners on our lake to discuss the requirements, because we really do not want this issue to pit neighbor against neighbor. We will provide extra training for the wake boat requirements for our greeters, provide them a handout for those who may attempt to bring wake boats in who are not complying with the home lake rule and do not have a Seymour Lake sticker. We'll address it on the wake boat rule at our annual meeting. I provide this information on our safe Facebook page and reach out to local news outlets to inform or update them regarding this rule. In closing, I'd like to reiterate that the Seymour Lake Association Board of Directors and Morgantown Select Board support the proposed rule with the 500-foot shoreline offset, which we consider to be supported by science and to be a prudent balance between overly restricting legitimate recreational use of wake boats with the need to carefully manage our precious state waters and mitigate the risk of further infestations of aquatic invasive species, which we know are incredibly expensive and difficult to control and remove. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you. Sheila, and then Pat Swazi, maybe? I'm sure I got that name right.
Morning. My name is Sheila Goss. I'm the Vice President of the Friends of Waterbury Reservoir and an avid canoeist and amateur wildlife photographer. 2023, there were approximately 107 pairs of nesting loons on Vermont lakes, which is an amazing number and indicative of the successful recovery of this iconic bird in our state. In 2019, the first documented pair by me of loons nesting on Waterbury Reservoir was seen, which led to a dedicated recovery effort. In the past 5 years, we have built a loon raft, documented and monitored nests and birds, provided warning signs and posters, and educated the public on how to respect and help the loons. In 2023, we had the first documented pair of our Waterbury, or documented case of our Waterbury pair actually laying an egg. The birds are making progress towards hatching baby loons, due in part to all our hard work, efforts, and the support of the Vermont Center for Eco Studies. The presence of wake surfing boats and the resulting waves, noise, and disruption of aquatic environment pose a threat to our loons and those on any lakes in Vermont. A nest that is flooded or swamped will be a failed nest, and no new loons will be hatched that year. The disruption of shoreline habitat also poses danger to the loons, as well as to the herons, eagles, and other wildlife that frequent and feed in those shoreline areas. Vermont Center for Eco Studies loon biologist Eric Hansen has stated that he sees the need for a 1,000-foot regulation due to the probable negative effects on nesting and aquatic habitat if a 500-foot rule exists. I canoe over 200 days per year. I actually got 250 in last year due to our global warming, with over a third of those days on the Waterbury Reservoir, mostly because of the varied and successful wildlife I can observe. It would be a shame if others lost that opportunity on our lake and other lakes due to the presence of wake surfing boats. Thank you for listening to me, and please listen to people. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Pat and John Bauer. And we have folks on this committee that are chairs of committees, and they may be stepping out to go do their other work. We'll go maybe a couple more folks, and I apologize for the other folks that are on the list here. But you're welcome to come back for next week's meeting and just check in with our committee assistant about putting yourself back on the schedule next week for testimony. So we'll do Pat.
Thank you.
Oh, he's down. Okay. And then we'll do John and then Mark, and then we'll stop there.
Thank you. I'll make this quick as I have to follow Senator Bray to his committee in a minute. I am Pat Swazi. I'm president of the Federation of Vermont Lakes and Ponds. The Federation of Vermont Lakes and Ponds is a coalition, a statewide coalition of volunteer lake associations. The Federation wants to applaud the work that the petitioners and the Agency of Natural Resources have done in creating this rule to regulate wake sports. Though not perfect, the rule is an important step forward in protecting the state's public waters and protecting lake users. The 500-foot buffer will remove wake sport activity from most of the state's lakes. While we did recommend a larger shoreline buffer as a precautionary measure, we do feel that implementation of this rule now is a top priority. Currently, wake sports can take place on all the inland lakes that allow motorized boats above 5 miles per hour, no matter the depth or size. And this causes a great deal of harm to many, especially in the smaller lakes. We are also concerned that at this point, sending the rule back to ANR for revision would further delay its implementation. Given that we're months away from the boating season, we are very concerned about this and would recommend implementation immediately. This rule will be the first of its kind in the nation, making Vermont a leader in this type of lake protection, and will provide a model for other states as they seek ways to protect their lakes. We believe the state's highest priority should be the protection of Vermont's precious water resources and the safety of the public using those waters. To this end, we urge you to approve this rule and order its implementation for the 2024 summer season. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. John Bauer, and then the last one will be Mark Milazzo.
Thank you, everyone, for your work on this issue and so many other important issues. I applaud the Agency of Natural Resources for studying the issue and proposing rules to regulate wake boats. Sadly, they do not adequately address the conflicts between users. Wake boats are loud. They have loud engines and louder stereos. Sounds carries well over the water, and it is a reflective surface. There is nothing in the way to absorb the sound. A wake boat rocking out in the middle of the lake will broadcast almost 360 degrees around the boat. Advertisements brag about the power of their sound systems, and I would consider this not an abnormal use of the lake rather than normal. I'm a longtime canoeist and sailor, and it's difficult to judge distance on the water. It's hard to tell how far away you are from shore, and 500 feet leaves little room for error. I also wonder, I work for an outdoor outfitter who rents canoes, kayaks, and paddle boards to visitors to our state. The people who use them are often inexperienced, and the ANR has no rule for wake boats to keep their distance from both other boats, presenting a clear and present danger of swamping small paddle craft. It's difficult for an experienced paddler to get back into a swamped boat, nearly impossible to push it to shore, and an inexperienced user has no chance whatsoever. So for the safety of all other users, for the health of our lake environments, and to preserve the bucolic vision of Vermont that we try so hard to cultivate, I implore you to reject this ANR proposed rule in favor of banning wake boats. I let them be on Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog, where there's adequate room for the sound and the wake to dissipate. They're not only disruptive on smaller lakes, they're potentially dangerous to other users. Sharing a lake with a wake boat is no way to escape modern life to enjoy the peace and serenity of the outdoors. Again, thank you for your time and work on this issue.
Okay, thank you, John. Mark?
Good morning. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak. My name is Mark Milazzo. I'm a resident of Peacham. I've been going to the pond for almost 47 years. Prior to that, my family was on Groton Pond. I'm both a paddler and a powerboat user. I'm a loon volunteer, and I'm a member of the Peacham Pond Association. A little bit about Peacham Pond. It's 340 acres. We don't have any aquatic invasive species today. We have a part-time breeder program. It's only 16 hours a week. And for the last 5 summers, we've averaged 75% non-motorized boat launches versus 25% motorized. And the majority of the motorized visits were fishing boats. In 2023, we had 4 nesting pairs of loons that produced 4 chicks from 3 different nests. This was a first for the pond. Under the proposed rule, a quarter of Peacham Pond will be open to wake sports. The criteria the ANR is required to consider is the public waters are held in the trust for the benefit of all Vermonters and visitors. The predominant use of the water prior to regulations, managed so that it can be enjoyed in a reasonable manner and safety for both current users and future generations of this state, and also looking at the normal uses of the pond to that date. And as it was noted earlier, wake sports, wake surfing is not considered a normal, or has not been considered a normal use on the pond or in Vermont. 2 studies support the 1,000-foot buffer that were submitted in a petition, one out of Georgia and one out of Quebec. I won't go into all the details, but I've given you a chart. The evidence is clear that 500 feet is not enough.
A&R has not met their obligation under Vermont Use of Public Water Rules Environmental Protection. And that is to avoid where possible and resolve where necessary conflicts in the use of public waters in a comprehensive manner. I ask that you increase the distance to shore to 1,000 feet, that A&R adds a section that says that these boats need to stay at least 500 feet away from other swimmers, other boaters, or divers down. Also recognize, as many of us who live near lakes or go on lakes, enforcement is very, very limited today. There are not enough resources. So my question really is, are we willing to forever alter some Vermont lakes for the sake of a few users? We pride ourselves on being an environmentally progressive state, but are we really? According to the DEC's own website, Vermont ranks lowest in the Northeast ecoregion, as well as in the nation for degraded shallow water habitat. Wake boat use will only make this worse. The Peach and Pond Association supports the 1,000-foot distance outlined in the Responsible Wakes for Vermont Lakes petition. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone that did provide testimony today. I apologize to those folks that didn't get an opportunity. But like I said, you can, we'll be meeting again next Thursday, starting at 8 o'clock. We'll start with this rule. So if you didn't give testimony and you still want to, at next meeting, see Charlene. I don't know where Charlene went, but she'll be there at the desk there. Thank you, everybody. We have one other rule next week. It's an emergency rule, so that shouldn't take up much time. But we should be able to take the majority of the meeting to have a conversation around this rule. Thank you to the department.
Chair, if I might just call attention, I spoke generally to being able to implement this rule for this summer season. I appreciate the opportunity to speak more specifically to that next week. So just want to call attention to that.
I think you're going to get a lot of questions.
Trying our best practically to gear up for that. But there are, setting up a system for the decal registration. There's components that will take up some ramp time, but we can definitely address whether wake sports are occurring or not from the get-go. So.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.